In this video, we're going to be talking about latency. Latency is the delay or the time it takes your computer to process audio and then send it out to the computer speakers or back to you in a monitoring environment. When you sing into a microphone, the signal first needs to get taken from an analog signal to a digital one into the computer to get processed. It then gets turned back into an analog signal again so you can hear it at the output or in your headphones. These conversions take time, which is known as latency. You can look at latency as the delay, measured in milliseconds. Too much latency is bad, as the delay will put you off when you're trying to record instruments in doing a recording session. Latency is unavoidable in computers and hardware, however we can take steps to greatly reduce it so it doesn't affect us when recording and it's not noticeable. To access the latency settings, go to Preferences, then the Audio tab, and then you'll find the latency heading with all the latency preferences underneath. The main parameter to do with latency is the buffer size. This basically means how much time does the computer have to process the audio. The buffer breaks the audio down into chunks of samples for processing. The smaller the chunks, the lower the latency or delay, but at the trade-off of using more CPU power. At lower values, this can cause clipping and noisy artifacts as well as audio dropouts, as you'll hear in a second. With our buffer size set to 512 samples, we can see our input and output latencies. Add these two numbers together and we get our overall latency, as we can see underneath. This number underneath is the time it takes live to process my vocal when I talk into a microphone and then send it back out to a set of headphones. Due to playing live instruments, singing, and tapping in rhythms using MIDI controllers, it's important to get this buffer size as low as we possibly can without adding any noise. This in turn means a low latency, which needs to be approximately 20 milliseconds maximum. For the key and ear view, and those that need to be rhythmically precise, such as drummers, you might want to get this to below 10 milliseconds. If you want to hear what a 10 millisecond delay sounds like, you can test this with the simple delay plugin later on. So now, if we decrease our buffer size, you can see our latency reduce. Many producers will optimize Ableton differently depending on the task in hand. For recording and monitoring, use the lowest buffer size possible to reduce the latency. Then once you finish recording, you can bump the latency back up again to 512 or 1024 samples. Raising the buffer size after the recording stage will take the load off of the CPU and reduce the risk of having any artifacts or audio dropouts later on in the mixing stage. As well as this, it will also allow you to use more CPU intensive plugins. So to recap, when you first start your project, you want to have a low buffer size whilst you're recording in to reduce the latency. Then towards the end of your project, as it develops into a track, you'll want to increase your buffer size, as at this stage, the delay isn't going to affect the audio and it's more important to conserve your CPU. We can use the test tone to select the right buffer size for our computer. Just turn it on and then select your buffer size. If you can hear any clicks or pops, choose the next biggest buffer size up. We can also change the test CPU load on the test tone to see how it reacts under pressure. If you're having issues with getting your latency low enough using your built-in output, then I strongly suggest getting an external sound card or an audio output device. These handle the analog to digital conversion and processing for your computer, freeing its CPU up for other processing tasks. This results in a lower latency and cleaner audio when recording, as well as a faster CPU in the latter stages of your track. So now you should have your sound card all set up with a low buffer size to ensure your latency is under control. In the next video, we'll take a look at starting a new project and saving within Live.